Welcome back, everyone. Hope you all been doing well. So, Tom Aspinall recently dropped an update regarding his eye situation. This update was dropped on his channel. It included things like what he's been up to, the different doctors he's seen. He even dropped some medical documentation verifying some of his claims. Shows, according to what the reports were read, he should have some soft tissue damage to the eye, as well as had diplopia, which means double vision, for an extended period of time. But finally having this update with having gone silent on the details of the situation for some time does leave us with the question that we've all got on the forefront of our minds. What do we do with the UFC's current heavyweight division? Following the departure of Francis Ngannou, the heavyweight division has been in this kind of state of limbo for an extended period of time now. It appears as if specifically the title picture, we can't keep a constant active champion. There's always something going on, ranging from things like John Jones's injury to his eventual intentional delay of the division. Then now the situation that we have with Tom Aspinall and his eye concerns following the eye poke in his matchup against Cyril Gane just feels as if the division is kind of condemned at times. It's kind of reminiscent of how the UFC's light heavyweight division was a few years ago, prior to the advent of Alex Pereira. Following all of this, we're going to take a quick look at the top 6 members of the title picture, and we can kind of see what the current state is, and maybe even perhaps provide some suggestions of how we could move it around. We'll start with the top, Tom Aspinall himself. Now that we finally have this update, him and Cyril Gane, which is the number 1 person in the rankings itself under the champion, it's evident. We all know what it is. The only thing for those two, which both fighters have already agreed to once the health condition has been settled, is that immediate rematch. I think a lot more people are now in hopes of Cyril Gane, whether it be because of dislike of Tom Aspinall or just a renewed faith in his skill set following his performance in just that first round against Aspinall. I think a lot of people will be a lot more supportive of Gane in this rematch and a lot more expectant of how he will perform in this one. I think this is the most important fight in the current UFC's heavyweight division because it quite literally is the one with the belt on the line. There's no other fight that is basically lock standing the UFC's movement of their heavyweight division as much as this one is. When we take a look at the number 2 contender, that's when things get a little bit more interesting. Number 2 contender is Alexander Volkov. In all of this stuff with the UFC's heavyweight division, it feels as if Volkov is the one who keeps getting screwed over. He was initially supposed to have beaten Cyril Gane in a lot of people's eyes, including my own, in their matchup. When Cyril Gane won, it felt a lot like he got cheated out of the opportunity. In a lot of our opinions, that first fight should have been a rematch between Aspinall and Volkov, not Gane and Aspinall. However, Dana White promised to treat him well, and then we saw the matchup against Jelton Almeida. Fight that didn't make sense to a lot of us at the time that it happened as treating well, especially with the stylistic matchup of Almeida. However, in another controversial state of event, a lot of us felt as if Almeida was the one who actually won that fight against Volkov. But I also think that because of the way how Almeida performed, a lot of us actually completely are okay with that, including myself. I believe that Volkov has put in the work. He's made a lot of improvements, and he is deserving of that next in line opportunity. But that's not something that he got. Unfortunately, from the eye poke situation to this rematch being mandatory, Volkov has now been relegated to a position where he's once again waiting on the opportunity that feels like it may have been stolen right from him when he was that close. Then we have Sergey Pavlovich. At one point, the fighter that was commonly referenced as the White Ngannou, fighter who used to be on a massive knockout streak and terrifying the division, the real boogeyman. Initially, he was actually supposed to be the one currently in Tom Aspinall's position. He was the guy who a lot of people expected to run through the division and terrify it until he himself got knocked out by Aspinall in their matchup, resulting in his entire momentum feeling like it got reset. Not just because he lost the fight, but because since then, Pavlovich has been nowhere near the fighter that he once was. He hasn't been anywhere near as eager. He hasn't been anywhere near as active. He hasn't been anything like what we've seen from him before in the past. When we look at how Sergey has developed, yes, he still won. He still wins his fights. But the dominance that he once held, to the degree that he once held it, it feels very, very sluggish. When we look at his performance against Salsa Boy, for example, his combinations were slower. His finishing instincts felt a lot weaker. Like, even when we look at his other matchup, it feels as if Sergey Pavlovich has lost some of the confidence that he once held. Because it's one thing when you're the one who's knocking everybody out. But when you realize that, yes, the same threat is still presented to you as well, sometimes that can do a little bit of mental damage to someone. Moving on, we have Curtis Blades, who in all of this kind of feels like the odd man out in this entire title picture. Curtis Blades is one of the most experienced fighters on the entire heavyweight roster. Curtis Blades has also fought the majority of the top six himself. He was the first person who halted, or let's say delayed, Jelton Almeida's momentum in the heavyweight division when he finished him. He's fought against Tom Aspinall himself, having that technical victory over Aspinall for the first time when Aspinall got that leg injury in their initial matchup, and then having the recent rematch against him, which he lost to Aspinall while competing for the interim title. Then he's also fought Volkov and Pavlovich himself. So Curtis Blades has kind of been that person who's perpetually near or at the top of the division, but just never seems to be able to get over the line and really get across that hump to becoming the guy. Blades kind of just seems to be at this momentous point in his career where you have to pick if you're still a contender or if you're about to allow yourself to be regulated as a gatekeeper. We don't really see anything above him where I think that he could overcome. And even the people below him with the constant surging contenders, you're left at that state where you have to determine, is this guy just there until somebody else can meet him at where he's at and surpass him? I think that's for him to decide. Then we have Salsa Boy, Waldo Cortez Acosta, probably the most talked about member of the top six in recent times. Somebody who's been proactive in a lot of aspects, kind of borrowing a little bit of that morale momentum, and has had a lot of people really developing a like for him and becoming part of his fan base. When you look at situations like him versus Ante Delia and kind of how he sold this whole Tom Aspinall thing while fighting against somebody who is one of Tom Aspinall's teammates, getting eye poked himself, and then immediately getting the knockout afterwards, and then his activity level, like really playing and really jabbing at Tom Aspinall. Waldo Cortez Acosta has been making a great case for himself as not just a fan favorite, but also as a contender. And especially with this recent announcement of him versus Derek Lewis, he's really been the person on the forefront of the heavyweight division right now. Finally, member of the top six, we have Jelton Almeida, to rank fifth person as far as the contenders are concerned. Jelton Almeida is a unique person. He's someone who moved up to the division and found great success. Ladderman skill, as they tend to say. He had phenomenal grappling, excellent wrestling, incredible takedowns that seems effective against everyone. But there are times where his performances get so boring because not because of a grappling, not because of the wrestling, but because it feels as if he himself has consciously regulated himself to just stalling out the fights and winning in any means that doesn't involve throwing fists. It can be very annoying of an experience at times because, especially with this recent performance against Volkov, it felt disgusting, if we're being honest. It felt like a man doing any and everything to not fight while being a fighter. He dragged Volkov constantly. He had very, very, very minimal actual submission attempts, if any. He did punches that weren't meant to do damage, but just to keep busy. It felt like somebody who's cosplaying as a fighter while in there in an actual fighting situation. It's very, very weird to say this as well, because as a former grappler myself, I tend to appreciate the art a lot. And then not only that, we've seen situations and circumstances in which Almeida is capable of getting finishes. We've seen that his striking isn't horrible. While he's not no Cyril Gahn, he's not an A1 striker, but it's decent, especially for the UFC's heavyweight division. We've also seen that he does have a submission aspect capable in his game. We've seen him get submissions. However, it feels like it's not something that he even attempts to do. He's very much set on forcing these long, drawn out exchanges that just put off fans. If you look at Waldo Cortez Acosta, if I say that he's constantly building a fan base, it feels like Almeida is constantly killing a fan base. And then when you have that dichotomy, and then you have these situations where a lot of us genuinely do believe that he got robbed against Volkov, yet still everyone is in support of it because we can't reward this devious behavior of winning in such immoral ways. You can't, you have to eliminate that aspect of his game, which is it's not about just winning sometimes. If you win enough, yes, people will eventually accept it. But at some point, you're going to run into a blockade, and you have to at least attempt to provide some form of entertainment. This cannot be your constant norm. Then, despite all of that, we also have this looming overarch of Alex Pereira versus John Jones. In my opinion, not really a threat to the title picture itself per se. However, it does undermine the overall validity of the division because a fight like that, which is honestly should be considered a gimmick fight, because it's not for a belt, it's not for a ranking, it's not for any intentions of the UFC's actual heavyweight contendership. Yet still, due to everything going on, it might be the most exciting thing in the division right now. And at the end of the day, this is still a money making business, especially with the announcements we've seen recently. You don't want to be in that position where your division's actual title picture is seen as less trivial in comparison to a gimmick fight, especially with the John Jones still being on the outskirts with Dana White right now. If they end up resolving that, it might really be a big blow to the heavyweight division's validity. So what do we do? With all of this going on, how do we address it? How do we settle it? My opinion, first thing we need is that Cyril Gane Tom Aspinall rematch. As far as importance, not chronologically, but as far as overall importance, first thing we need is a date for that Cyril Gane versus Tom Aspinall rematch. The overall goal everyone in these divisions, for the most part, aims at is the UFC championship belt. We need to settle that and have a direct goal to pursue. Next thing, I think Alexander Volkov has two options. I think option A would be him facing the winner of Waldo Cortez Costa versus Derek Lewis. This would be a good opportunity for everyone because most of us have the understanding that Volkov is the number one contender after Cyril Gane challenges the title. Right now, Volkov has a history with Derek Lewis. Lost to him in 2018 by finish. Volkov has made significant improvements since then. He's also been significantly more active than Derek Lewis has been in the same time period. We've watched Volkov build skills from his grappling defense to his distance management to even his patience. So that would be a fairly interesting matchup to see. Then Derek Lewis himself being somebody who is considered a fan favorite in a lot of aspects, and somebody who himself has kind of softcore been pursuing a Tom Aspinall matchup. Then we have Waldo Cortez Acosta, exciting fighter, excellent movement, one of the new generation of heavyweight, great striking, great timing, pretty funny too, if we're being honest. Overall, he's got all the aspects on paper that would intrigue a fan. This matchup between two fan favorites, nobody loses, regardless of who wins that. But then I believe that winner should pursue a matchup against Volkov due to Volkov potentially being sidelined for an extended period of time with everything going on right now with Aspinall and Gane. Can't just have these fighters just sitting in that meantime. Or we could have Volkov keep Blades busy, and then we can have Volkov versus Blades 2. Also, a matchup that they had in the past, which Volkov lost, I believe, in 2020 against Curtis Blades. This would be great for Volkov and this run that he's gone on recently because he's rebuilt himself a lot. In a lot of people's opinions, he won that rematch against Cyril Gane. Him beating Curtis Blades would only make his own resume better and really showcase his improvements. I would make that matchup against Tom Aspinall that much more interesting, not because of Curtis Blades, at least not strictly because of Curtis Blades, but because it shows his ability to improve even further than what we've already seen. And it would make people be more willing to consider an opportunity of victory against Tom Aspinall. And then we have Sergey Pavlovich. I think the next best thing for Sergey would be a confrontation with Chelton Almeida. I understand a lot of people would be opposed to this because Almeida just fought against Volkov for a top three position. So a lot of people would feel a bit perturbed with the idea of him getting another shot at a top three opponent. However, you understand that at this point, Sergey is ranked below Volkov, one, and two, there is nobody left for Sergey Pavlovich to properly test himself against. While it might be a dangerous matchup for Sergey, not just because of risk of finish, as we've discussed earlier, that's not a huge aspect of Almeida's game, but stylistically, it may be a bit difficult for him to overcome. But we also need to see improvement on the behalf of Sergey. We need to see that he's able to get his confidence back, and we need to see him go against other surging prospects within the division. Right now, Sergey is ranked way too high to just throw him to the wolves against like an Ante Delia or anybody like that. Sergey has already put in the work to get beyond that stage. However, when we compare him to somebody like Jelton Almeida, a matchup that most of us would agree that he is capable of winning, especially if he's the old Sergey, let's see that. Almeida also is a bit high up right now. He's putting in a lot of work. Let's put him right back in there against another killer, or at least somebody who should have that killer heart. That Walter Cortez Acosta win is aging beautifully for Sergey Pavlovich right now. Let's give him one more. If he can get him out of there, now we have another person who's in contention for a possible title opportunity. Then, in recent history, the UFC's heavyweight division has been having an influx of new prospects and contenders. As I've mentioned earlier, we have somebody like a Brando Perkic who looked great in his debut fight. Then we have multiple people who are building their own resumes. We have somebody like a Taliesin Teixeira who might still be a little bit younger in his career. We saw that he had an opportunity against Lewis, which he ended up failing at. But right after that, we also have probably the biggest heavyweight prospect right now in Walter Walker, the heel hook king. Been going on a massive tear. It looks beautiful in this division right now. They bring in that brand new life that we really need at this point in time. Let's see how they continue to develop. Let's see if we can get this division moving. Let's see if we can really, really bring it back to what it needs to be, what it once was. Or even better. But let me know what y'all think, though. Like, comment, subscribe. Peace.